A very good evening all. I'm Aditi Lamba with the Wednesday night edition of South Asian News, Vision of Asia. We are coming to you from our studio in New York City. Welcome to the show. Let's begin the episode taking a look at the coronavirus pandemic and its impact. The world has surpassed 121 million cases of COVID-19 with more than 2.5 million deaths. Here in the United States, we are at more than 537,000 COVID-19 deaths with more than 29.6 million cases. On vaccines, the White House says that more than 22 million doses will be distributed in the next 7 days. Nearly 143 million vaccine doses have been distributed and more than 111 million have been administered. Meanwhile, variants of the virus are concerning health experts nationwide as vaccine efforts continue. These variants are being considered more contagious and deadly. Many U.S. states are also ramping up vaccines and increasing eligibility to vaccinate more people. In politics, stimulus checks will start to roll out as early as today, helping the most vulnerable, affected individuals by this pandemic. Also in politics, there is a growing political tension regarding a surge of migrant children unaccompanied crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. The treatment of these children has become a huge concern and is one of the biggest issues at the border right now. So how does all this impact us? We have tonight U.S. representatives and discussers discussing much on U.S. politics and coronavirus updates. Here are the headlines. Dr. Deena Adimoolam says we are just not there yet. COVID-19 updates, New York. Emergency Department nurse Namrata Ramani shares frontline experience on coronavirus pandemic. Hackensack Meridian help. Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney recalls U.S. Capitol insurrection, 12th Congressional District, New York. It's time for a short break on Vision of Asia, Voice of the Community. Stay with us. We'll be right back. And welcome again. I am Aditi Lama and this is Vision of Asia, the Wednesday night episode of South Asian News. Let's take a look at coronavirus measures and updates. Cases of coronavirus variants are exploding all across the nation with more than 1,000 new cases reported on a daily basis. There are 3 major variants from the United Kingdom, South Africa and Brazil that are spreading all across and are more deadly and contagious. Experts fear about a 4th surge of coronavirus even with COVID-19 vaccines being administered. Vaccine production and distribution is ramping up and more states are beginning to heed a call from President Joe Biden to expand eligibility to all adults by the 1st of May. President Biden also said that he was directing the federal government to secure an additional 1 million doses of Johnson & Johnson's single-dose COVID-19 vaccines. Bringing more insight into vaccine and their impact, we spoke with Dr. Deena Adimoolam, who also spoke in the states that are loosening COVID-19 restrictions too soon. Here is Dr. Adimoolam. When we're looking at now more on vaccine, Dr. Johnson & Johnson's single-dose vaccine has finally been distributed and is being administered across the nation. It is a single dose but has less efficacy in comparison to Moderna and Pfizer. How are you kind of looking at it? People are a little uncertain about if they should take that vaccine or wait for Pfizer or Moderna. What's your advice?
So as we know, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has 72% plus efficacy for COVID in the United States. So that's a really great number. That means that more than 50% efficacy against COVID. But I think it's also important to look at other information and data that we have from the Johnson & Johnson vaccine too. So we know that there's 85% protection against severe COVID infection. And the number that I really like, Aditi, is the fact that there were 0 hospitalizations for COVID and there were 0 deaths from COVID from those who received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. So this vaccine has helped save lives. It's helped protect people from being hospitalized. It's helped protect people from severe COVID as well as mild to moderate COVID. So it's absolutely something I would recommend for patients to seek. If someone is offered an option, you can consider which one you like, but most of the time you're not really given an option, so you should just go with what's available. It's also a one-time dose, which can be very convenient for many people's day-to-day lives.
Yeah, that's so true. That means you only have side effects once and not twice with the other vaccines. You know, another vaccine that's been up for kind of debate, doctor, over this weekend and this week is going to go into debate is AstraZeneca. It has been approved by the World Health Organization, but not yet in the US. However, several countries right now have suspended the use of AstraZeneca due to an issue that they're seeing with blood clots. What are you looking at in that sense? And what exactly are they saying about, you know, these blood clots that is really affecting the body after the AstraZeneca vaccine has been given?
So I think what's important to note is how many AstraZeneca vaccinations have actually been administered. So the thought is there's more than 17 million AstraZeneca vaccinations that have been administered in this world. And out of that 17 million, we only have a handful of cases that have been described related to these blood clots. I believe there's about 15 cases of deep vein thrombosis and 22 cases of pulmonary embolus. And so, yes, you know, those are concerning side effects, but they're also extremely, extremely rare. In 17 million people, only having 22 side effects of a pulmonary embolus is actually less than what we see in our normal population. So this is a very, very rare side effect. If you're concerned about your risk for having a blood clot related to the AstraZeneca vaccine, important that you talk to your doctor about that. But from the data that we have from the AstraZeneca trials, it suggests that, you know, most of the patients who actually received the AstraZeneca vaccination in the clinical trial, this was again a rare side effect. And the same type of side effect was even seen in the placebo population in people who didn't even get the vaccination. So it tells you that there may not necessarily be a cause and effect, meaning that the AstraZeneca vaccine causes blood clots. We need more data. And I think it's important for people to also think about COVID-19 and the risks of developing blood clots even from COVID-19 infection. We know that COVID-19, one of the symptoms can be blood clots, pretty significant blood clots that can lead to damage to the kidney or damage to lung function, for example. So I think we need to think about how this vaccination can really help prevent a lot of the complications of COVID, such as blood clots in general, and which are probably at their higher risk for that if they get COVID than they are if they actually get a vaccination.
When you're looking at AstraZeneca, doctor, and when we're discussing the situation, do you think they're going to need to do these booster shots that we're talking about, perhaps so that, you know, they can tackle the variants and so on and so forth?
So I think that at least in the United States, we're still looking through the data that AstraZeneca is able to provide us with, because as you know, this is not authorized in the United States as of yet. Right. But from what we can tell, the data that they've released, it looks like there may be some protection against some variants.
Right. Now, $1 million question for you that everyone that's, you know, getting vaccinated across the nation is asking, doctor, once you have had the 2 doses of the shot, what is safe to do after you've been vaccinated? Can you travel? Could you go to restaurants? Can you visit your elderly? What do you recommend?
So as I'm sure most of you are aware of the new CDC guidance that came out a few weeks ago related to what patients who've gotten their full vaccination dosing, meaning that they have received both vaccines, if they got Pfizer and Moderna or the first vaccine of Johnson & Johnson, and it's been 2 weeks since their last dose, what they can actually do. And so the guidance has been that if you are vaccinated, you can be indoors with a vaccinated individual or small unit, household unit, and be able to take off your mask and not socially distance. But it has to be a small gathering indoors. The CDC is still recommending that people who are vaccinated are not gathering in moderate to large group settings. And the CDC is also recommending that people do not travel in airplanes or other forms of transportation. Because they fear that there may be a spread of variants related to travel.
We have now an ITV Gold exclusive featuring a Frontline Hero from the Hackensack Meridian Health Emergency Department nurse Namrata Ramani. Nurse Ramani was deployed in the COVID-19 intensive care unit during the first surge of coronavirus cases in the country and had direct interaction with many who were in the ICU with extreme illness. She first-handedly took care of very sick patients and at times was the only person these patients saw before they succumbed to the virus. With such a close experience with the worst of the pandemic, Nurse Ramani wholeheartedly discussed the incredibly hard situations nurses and all the frontline workers faced and continue to face, as well as the resilience and commitment of these individuals towards their jobs in saving lives. Passionate about her work, Nurse Ramani also reflected on the need for all to continue following coronavirus protocols and guidelines and was grateful to her fellow workers and management. She still continues to see COVID-19 patients in the emergency department. Here is a conversation with what happened with COVID-19 surges and the sentiments on all who served and continue to serve the patients. Here is Nurse Namrata Ramani. How does it feel when somebody calls you a frontline hero?
Honestly, it doesn't really register. I think a lot of us we've had this conversation that we don't really feel like heroes. We walk into work and we, do our job. We do what we can, and we understand what the job description is that we go in, we do the best that we can, and at the end of the day, we may save a couple of lives, and that can, I guess, quote unquote, call us a hero. But we really just feel like we're just doing our jobs on a regular basis. So getting the recognition of what we do, we definitely appreciate it. I know I appreciate everyone's acknowledgement of how hard we work and everything that we're doing, but we really don't feel like we're any different than anybody else on the front line. We don't feel like we're actually heroes. We just feel like we're doing our job on a regular basis.
I think you all are very, very humble, everyone that's working in the front line, and thank you for all the work you're doing. Namrata, I would love to know, when the first surge of COVID-19 happened last year, when we saw the worst of COVID, as we can, talk about, you were actually an ICU nurse at that point. Later on, you went into the emergency department, where you still continue to see COVID-19 patients. How was it being an ICU nurse at that point, at the peak of COVID-19? I want you to take us through the journey of what exactly happened.
Yeah, so I started off on a med-surg unit when our first COVID patient came into the hospital, and that unit got converted into a COVID unit, and then I was redeployed into our COVID ICU. But I remember the first patient coming in and us, surprised that we had somebody coming in with COVID. And it really just exploded. There was the first day where we had one, and then the next day there was three, and then all of a sudden we came back after a couple of days and the entire unit was just full of COVID patients. Being in the ICU, when I got moved down there, I was working with a lot of travel nurses who had come from all over the country at the time to help us out here at the New York metro area. And they were a godsend. We needed them at the time. We were so short on nurses and beds and room. And we really, our COVID ICU was a makeshift COVID ICU. We took a different part of the hospital that we weren't using because we weren't doing surgeries in that area. And we converted it into an ICU. And these nurses from all over the country, stepped up, helped us out, did everything that we could have asked them to do and taught us a lot along the way. We all learned together about how to take care of these patients. In the ICU, definitely taking care of the patients in such a critical condition was new to me personally. I'd never taken care of patients that were so sick and needed so many interventions. And the team that we were working with were just phenomenal. It was incredible to see my colleagues, not just the nursing staff, the doctors, the respiratory therapists, the anesthesiologists, the housekeepers, the dietary staff, the social workers, all of them, faced with this new uncertainty and not having real answers to anything, but coming up with solutions on the fly and on the spot. It was really inspiring. It was an honor to be able to work with everybody at the time. And even though it was hard and tough and very, very uncertain, and a lot of times it was great to be able to work with everybody and see just how quickly people can adapt to these kinds of situations.
And Namrata, while you were working there, what kind of things entailed for your job duties? What kind of things did you have to do around the patients?
So in the ICU, this was a new concept for me personally, was proning the patients. It's something that was recommended for patients that are intubated and struggling to breathe. We would take them and flip them from being on their back to being on their stomach. It's something that when you're in such a critical state, can throw off your hemodynamics. It can make you even more critical. So when we're trying to reposition these patients, it takes a whole team of us to make sure that all the tubes stay in place. Because these patients are also, not only do they have a tube to help them breathe, but they are also paralyzed and sedated, so they can't move. They don't know what's going on. They can't assist us in all of that. And so when we try to flip them, that was one of the toughest, I think, parts of being in the ICU, was just knowing that after we try to reposition them, that there is a chance that alone, that assistance that we're trying to give them to help them breathe they might not be able to tolerate it. And they may decline in the process. So it definitely took a team. There was at least like 5 or 6 of us all together that would just with one patient, just to try to flip them over to give them a little bit more comfort to breathe.
Time for the short break on Vision of Asia, Voice of the Community. We'll be right back. And welcome back. I'm Aditi Lama and this is Vision of Asia South Asian News segment. Now we have another segment of our ITV Gold exclusive featuring Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, Democrat U.S. Representative for New York's 12th Congressional District. The Congresswoman was at the Capitol on January 6th, the darkest day in democracy, when pro-Trump mob breached the U.S. Capitol, which killed 5. Congresswoman Maloney, who is also the chairwoman of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform, since then has introduced a bill to help investigators work on a commission model after the 9/11 Commission used to investigate the attacks. The measure has authorized law enforcement agencies to require a company to disclose its beneficial ownership information if that information could be helpful to the investigation. In our conversation, Congresswoman Maloney shared her personal story of January 6th and the huge impact it leaves behind on U.S. history. Here is Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney. You were there for the Capitol insurrection on January 6th. A lot of the members of the Congress dealt with what they called was life-threatening and a dark day for our democracy. Could you please share with us your experience on that day and how it has been to then go ahead and have these Capitol hearings to truly figure out what went wrong that day?
Well, that day will go down in history as one of the darkest in the history of our country. I was not afraid for myself. I was afraid for our democracy because they were taking over the Capitol. And one of the things that has distinguished America is the peaceful transfer of power, the respect of the ballot box, the respect of the ballot. We were in the process of certifying the election of President Biden, which is part of the Electoral College requirement. And because of COVID, we were restricted how many people could be on the floor. Speaker Pelosi was presiding, and only the representatives from the states of Arizona and Pennsylvania, where there were contested ballots and a vote taking place in a debate, they were on the floor. I was watching it on my television set in my office, and I could see the speaker being approached to leave, and that was disturbing. I didn't understand. I saw her saying, "No, I don't want to leave," but she left. Someone else took over. But then I saw the Secret Service sort of hustle and escort out in a very quick way Leader Hoyer. So you knew there was trouble. Representative Gosar from Arizona was speaking, and he kept hitting the desk saying, "There's no order in the House. There's no order in the House." My office is right across from the Capitol, so I could look out the window and see the people from the west side of the Capitol coming around to the front, going up the steps, going in the side door. And you could watch the insurrection really on television because people were inside taking tapes and they were putting it up. So you could literally watch it. And it was extremely disturbing. For 4 hours, they took over our government. The proceedings were halted. And I knew the attitude of our leadership in our country that we would not stop till we completed the certification. As soon as order was restored, we went back into session. We stayed in session until 4 o'clock in the morning, certified the ballots electing President Biden. As chair of the of the Oversight Committee, along with many other committees, we are conducting oversight. Have had several briefings with the FBI, the Capitol Police, the Secret Service, on what happened, what they knew before, what they did that day, and what they are doing now to make sure that it never happens again. It's very, very serious. It's being taken very seriously. The first order of government is to protect our people and to protect our capital. And we need to get better at it, and we need to make sure it doesn't happen again.
That's so true. And, I'm glad that you were all okay. It was a very scary day for all of us to watch. Congresswoman, you did do Diwali Stamp. That's a huge part of the South Asian culture right now. You've been there for the community. I would love for you to give one last message to the audience on what your focus is on them and what you like to say to the community.
Well, I say let there be light every day, not just on Diwali, and let's work together for good over evil and for achievements over inaction and just light in everyone's life and in every way. That's what the rescue package was about. It was actually with you that I started the Diwali Stamp. I was at one of those great festivals that we have down at South Seaport before the COVID, where we all gathered, and you and others said, Congresswoman, we want a Diwali Stamp. Everyone has a Diwali Stamp. You have the Hanukkah stamp, the Christmas stamp, the Enid stamp, the Kwanzaa stamp. Why not Diwali? I put in a bill. I worked on it many years to get the support. I even appealed to President Obama to support it, which he did, and we finally got it. They at first were telling me that it wouldn't make any money. No one would want the Diwali Stamp. I said, you don't understand the Indian American community and the supporters. And I would say every religion in some way. I know mine has Let There Be Light. It's part of the religion and part of the attitude. It became, we had the opening at the Council General's home here in New York, which is in my district. It was hundreds of people came, and they sold out that day. And it has continued to be one of the biggest selling stamps in the United States Stamp Office. So I'm very proud. I use the Diwali Stamp. We all use the Diwali Stamp. And it has such a positive, unifying message, which is what we need in this country right now. I also think that one of the greatest leaders of all time was Gandhi, with his message of peaceful resistance, peaceful messaging. Both Martin Luther King and many other leaders in America have credited Gandhi as their leader. Martin Luther King has received the Congressional Gold Medal. I think that his mentor and leader should receive it too. So I'm putting in a bill to honor Gandhi. It would be, I believe, the 50th anniversary of his death, I believe. Yes. And it's a long time past due that Gandhi received the recognition, not only for his leadership in India and towards independence, but also his leadership in the world. He became a glorified leader of all of the people who were working for self-government and self-representation, and in terms of Martin Luther King, massive changes with the civil rights laws of our country, which Martin Luther King led so brilliantly. But he always carried with him, I don't know if you knew this, he always carried with him a little book of Gandhi's sayings. Did you know that? I read that.
Yes, I've heard that, yes.
When he died, they went to his home, and on his desk was a book on Gandhi sitting right on his desk. So he was an inspirational leader to one of the greatest leaders in our country. And he was certainly one of the greatest leaders in India, and I would say the world. Yes. So I think the U.S. Congress should honor him.
Well, this wraps up our show for the night. Please send us your suggestions and get your voices and organizations on our show. Email us on events@itvgold.com or follow us on Facebook @itvgold. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel for free access to many of our popular shows. Thank you for joining us tonight from Queens, New York. This is Vision of Asia, and I am Aditi Lamba. Take care and be well.